Okay, thanks, Carolyn. My name is Pranoti Asher. I work at AGU, and I'm very pleased that Diane Dozier and Sam Mikasa have been able to join us today for today's webinar. We're very excited to learn about what kinds of things Diane and her colleagues have done at UTEP to increase the diversity of students not only in their own department but other programs. And we're also excited that Sam Mikasa, who has been is a former department chair but now a dean in the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences, how he has done, has learned stuff from the engineering side and how that could be possibly applied to the geosciences. So without further ado, I think Diane, you're on first.
That's right. Okay, so I just want to introduce you a little bit to University of Texas at El Paso and what we deal with, and I think these are common problems with attracting a diverse body of students. I'd also preface this by saying I've worked as a chair and as a program director, so I've had administrative as well as the side of education to work with these issues. So in El Paso, we're fairly mirror the community, and these kinds of things are, I think, quite common to other diverse communities. Many of the students don't speak English. We have issues with low income, and I think really importantly is, like many other communities, the students are their first in their families to attend college. Another thing that's unique to the El Paso area is we're a very closed loop, so that the students that are trained to be teachers, 80% of them end up right here in El Paso. So trying to educate teachers is important to getting a more diverse group of students into the workforce as well. So can I have the next slide, please? We have worked for a long time on these issues. Certainly, even though we have a diverse community, it's very difficult to attract students into the geosciences. We've had, I think, beginning to see success for a number of different things. This is just a plot that one of my colleagues who works at the community colleges put together to show some of the fluctuations. This is in our enrollment of geoscience students at UTEP, but some of the things that actually have been done at the community college, which have some part in increasing the number of students that we're seeing here at UTEP. And of course, at least at the undergraduate level, most of our students are minority students. So we're really working with a couple different facets of student cohorts, trying to get them interested in coming to UTEP and becoming geoscientists. Can I have the next slide, please? All of these cohorts, though, we focused on a number of key things. And I think, first of all, you have to engage the family, not just the student. A lot of these students have no role models. Their families have no idea what a geoscientist might do. We have to get the family support. We also have to sort of demonstrate to the students and their families that geoscientists are well paid. There's a lot of misperceptions about what geoscientists do and what kinds of ways that they can help their community. And I think this is really essential in El Paso, that they have to see some value added to the community in their role as a geoscientist. Another thing that's important in our community is that there's a perception that geoscientists work outdoors and it's a dirty activity, and a lot of students, their fathers are day laborers working in the fields, working in construction, and working outside is just not considered attractive or a step forward. So trying to emphasize that there are many roles for geoscientists that don't involve outdoor work is pretty important in our community. And then I think one thing that's really true across all diverse issues is that there's a lot of issues with self-esteem. You don't have to be an Einstein to be a geoscientist, and that there are many things in geoscience that really relate to you and your community. So those are things I think that are common to all of our students. So next slide, please. Some of the things that we do to reach out to students at the K-12 level, of course these are similar to, I know, what's been done at other institutions. Certainly just having visits to schools and having tours of the departments are important. But I think the next activity is one where we've really brought the family into the picture. We have an open house for Earth Science Week, and we have a lot of family-oriented activities, hands-on demonstrations. A lot of our students participate, and we've been having 2,000 to 3,000 people attend these. And we think this has been a highly successful way to expose the entire community to what geoscientists do. Focusing more on high school students, we have several summer camp programs, sophomore level students. We found that sophomores are at the level where they're beginning to make decisions about what they're going to do if they go to college. They haven't completely decided, and so it's a good time to talk about geoscience. Then those students that have expressed some interest in geoscience from the Pathways experience are invited to participate in another experience their junior or senior year called Metals. Another component, again, to bring the community into the picture is that we involve secondary science teachers in these summer camps as a way to expose them to geoscience so that they can help mentor the students and tell them, well, this is what a geoscientist does, and these are the kinds of ways that geoscientists think. We think that's very important. We have workshops also. This is more my colleagues at the community college for these secondary science teachers to, again, expose them more to what are careers in geosciences, what do students need to learn in high school to prepare themselves for a successful undergraduate experience, and how do they prepare for the workforce. And I think these initiatives, now that we've gotten them underway, are producing about 3 students a year that enter UTEP. That's a small number, but it's a start, and it's certainly going in the right direction. Can I have the next slide, please? The community college level is where we're putting in a huge amount of effort now, because many of the students, of course, are going to start at the community college due to the low income levels, and certainly at least our community college has branches in their community, so they do not have to travel very far to attend classes. So we worked first at establishing common courses, common texts, so that there would be essentially a seamless transfer process for these students. It's the same class pretty much. We can expect the same things to happen in physical geology at both institutions. Another important component that was established by colleagues at community college was they began to have research projects with community college students and UTEP faculty. That was done on a more informal basis, and then through some NSF support, where we now are supporting about 10 to 15 students a year at the community college that come and work with UTEP faculty. These students are at UTEP doing research with faculty and students here. They're involved in symposia. They're being advised by UTEP faculty and mentored by UTEP faculty. And this is, I think, really helping them feel secure when they make the transition to the 4-year institution. Our big challenge is finding support for them in that transition period. Coming to UTEP and tuition increases, you've got commuter costs, all these things, the books cost more, all these things that they really need support for. However, right now it's been a huge boost to our program. We're getting 5 to 10 students a year that have come in the last 2 years into our undergraduate program at UTEP. The next slide, please. At the UTEP level, I think a key thing is that these students need a lot of mentoring, and you can't practically mentor them enough. And I think they can also serve as excellent mentors for other students, and then there's kind of a snowball effect that can occur. At UTEP, for the students that do decide to start out here, we have a series of entering student programs where they work together as a cohort. We're trying to get more funding for this so that they can actually have a research experience that starts their freshman year, and they begin to see the relevance of what they're learning to actual hands-on activities. We have a campus office of undergraduate research initiatives that's taken a lot of the burden away from our department in helping coordinate activities for students on how to write abstracts, how to prepare posters, things like that that are actually done now at an institutional level and not just a department level. A lot of my assignments are in introductory courses include the family, so there are activities where they would go out with their family and make observations, and I think that's very successful, and again gets their children interested in what they're doing. We have a lot of service learning activities, and through all of these kinds of things that we've been able to increase now our enrollment. In the spring we're up to 68 geology majors, 14 geophysics, and 66 environmental science majors. And finally, I think the other important thing to stress is that the administration is very much behind this. We have to have the buy-in because with all the mentoring, we need to have this counted as part of our faculty evaluations, and that is actually one criterion that's used is how many students at the undergraduate level are you advising and mentoring and research. And I think that was basically all I was going to say about our program.
Okay, we'll move on to Sam.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Sam Mikasa, University of New Hampshire. I was asked by Pranati to sort of take a broad view of representation in both engineering and science. And so I put a bunch of slides together from a number of presentations I've given elsewhere that initially I'm going to focus on engineering, capacity building, and that sort of thing. But then eventually I'm going to zero in on geology and also talk about a couple programs we have here, which are not terribly dissimilar from what Diane I just described. So next slide, please. The first thing to point out is what is happening in the engineering world worldwide. You can see that if you look extreme right, that countries like China, which has a population of 1.3 billion people, so a very large number of people to begin with, but 21% of typical 18-year-old kids in China end up picking engineering going to college. And the net result of that is they're producing 1 million engineers per year in China. And if you come toward the left, you'll see that India, also with a population of slightly over 1 billion, is producing about 500,000 engineers per year. And then at very extreme left, looking at the US and Canada, the two countries combined have a population of about 360 million people, but only 4.5% of our 18-year-olds go into engineering. And you can see that the net result is in the US we are producing about 83,000 engineers per year, so not even 10% of the number of engineers being produced in China. Canada produces roughly 25,000 to 30,000 engineers per year. So very, very small numbers. And if you're worried about global competitiveness, this is not a fair fight, as you can see from the numbers. Next slide, please. When today's 18-year-old, I would admit to you, is a lot more sophisticated than I was when I was 18. They want to know, what is in it for me? What does it do? What is it likely to accomplish for me? So when I'm talking to prospective students coming to our university, I like to point out, and this slide I call it plan, but it's mislabeled here, so please excuse me there. But I'd like to point out some of the highlights of what I call the greatest engineering achievements of the 20th century. And you can see the list. I'm not going to go through this. This, by the way, I obtained from the National Academy of Engineering website. You can see that lots of conveniences that we have in the modern world have come out of a combination of engineering and various sciences, including geology, to get us to where we are. Next slide, please. The National Academy of Engineering has also identified what are known as the 14 grand challenges. So looking down the pike in the 21st century, we are going to have energy concerns. We are not going to continue burning hydrocarbons forever and get away with it. There is going to be increasing issues to do with environmental degradation, but also the issue of water. Water is going to be an ever diminishing commodity relative to the population of the planet. And then another bunch of issues that you can see to do with homeland security, cybersecurity. Almost every time you turn on your television, there is some issue about somebody trying to break into the Pentagon computers and even corporate America trying to steal intellectual property. So all of these are going to be challenges of the 21st century, and to an 18-year-old, they're actually an opportunity because this is where the employment is going to be, trying to counter this problem. Next slide, please. There is also the issue of the environment. This is where geology comes in. There is issues such as availability of irrigation water that's going to impact agriculture. There are issues with food security, both of those impacting health. I just mentioned water resources. I should also mention here the fact that the oceans are accumulating a significant amount of energy, and I think going forward we're going to see them creating bigger and bigger storms. Those of you in the Northeast remember Hurricane Sandy that devastated New Jersey, New York just a few months ago. I think going forward, that kind of activity is going to become more frequent. And along with all of that, you are going to be impacting species in the oceans, acidification of the oceans, warming of the oceans. They all have impact on the ecosystems there. Next slide, please. Now, in geology, this is a slide from AGI. There has been, you can see the trend there from 1973 going toward 2005. Things haven't changed by very much if you fast forward to 2013, which is where we are today. The number of, and I apologize that along the y-axis I didn't label that, but that's the number of majors that are going into the geosciences, bachelor's degree, master's degrees, and PhDs. And you can see that there was a tremendous collapse in the field in terms of numbers following the recession of around 1983. This is when a lot of my friends lost their jobs in the oil industry in Houston. We never fully rebounded, as you can see. The blue line at the very top there shows that collapse. And we've been producing graduates at a much lower rate than the needs of the industry going forward. So on the next slide, you can see that the demand for geoscientists, petroleum geoscientists here, identified as petroleum geoscientists, the demand is the dashed blue line at the very top, and the red is recognition of the fact that many people in this industry were hired back in the 60s and 70s, and they're reaching retirement age, so they're on a very highly pronounced negative slope, as you can see. And at the very bottom in purple is the growth in the field, how many geoscientists we are producing. The net effect is a workforce that is shown in the green line, which very much undershoots what the demand is. And this is going all the way to 2020. you can see that the workforce that we're going to be able to produce with this kind of growth and that kind of workforce retirement is nowhere near what the demand is. Again, to an 18-year-old, I present this as an opportunity. You are going to be needed. You're going to be employable. Next slide, please. Okay, now we can get very philosophical, and I don't mean to spend a lot of time talking about this, but much of what I have summarized on this particular slide has to do with what I call human security. On the next slide, I'm going to be showing you uncontrolled population growth. This has consequences with respect to resources management or even resources consumption. And this is happening at a time when climate is changing with a future that is not particularly predictable. And at the same time, we're using land to a great degree to produce food, which leads to soil exhaustion. So all sorts of issues that are likely to be confronting us. But again, to a geoscientist, you can also sell this as complexities or problems that are going to require solutions. Therefore, if you specialize in this area, you're going to be needed. Next slide. We can skip that. Just keep going. Next slide. Okay, so in this one, this is a slide I took from a talk I gave in Mozambique a couple of years ago to show that, beginning around the 1950s or even slightly before that, that there has been exponential growth in population just about everywhere in the world, but particularly in developing countries. Now, on the previous slide, I showed that water is going to become a problem. And I like to summarize all of that by pointing out that, estimates made by the UN years ago pointed out that the carrying capacity of a continent like Africa back in 1970, so this is, some 43 years ago, is about 500 million people. The population of Africa today is actually double that. So when we talk about carrying capacity, what I mean is the caloric content of the food that's produced in, the available arable land, the availability of water, and so on. All of those things are now a treasured resource. There isn't enough to have a carrying capacity of 1 billion people. And so going forward, the problem is going to be even more compounded, and somebody has to find a solution. So next slide, please. The next sequence of slides are really just pretty to point out change and how dramatically or how quickly change is taking place. This is a photograph of Mount Kilimanjaro, a volcano I know very well. I climbed it when I was 15. You can see that in 1912, the snow line, and this is actually glacial ice, came all the way down to about 16,000 feet. The mountain itself is 19,340 feet high. So 16,000 feet is where the snow line was. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, you'll see that 16,000 feet is roughly where the cloud is at the very bottom of those tongues of ice that are coming down. You can see that much of the ice around the mountain has disappeared. This is a picture from 13 years ago. And then for the next slide, a picture from just a few years ago, I think taken in 2006, you can see that those tongues of snow that came down have disappeared. The reason I show this particular picture with the elephants in the foreground is that much of African wildlife actually relies on water resources coming from glacial ice, such as you had on Kilimanjaro. When these glaciers are totally gone, the animals that we love in places like Amboseli National Park and Tsavo National Park and so on, Serengeti National Park, they will not have any sources of water, and they are likely to, well, either will have to migrate to some place where there might be availability of water, or more likely, a lot of these animals are facing extinction. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to finish off with just a few slides, 2 or 3 slides, talking about what we've done at the University of New Hampshire. And again, I remind you that this is not terribly different from what Diane was describing. We have summer programs. Ours is called Tech Camp. Unfortunately, it costs a lot of money, so we can't make it terribly large. It has 2 components to it. One is co-ed. That one was about 52 students, and I've scaled that up to 70 students this summer. And we have another component for middle school girls, 12, 13-year-old girls. We started out with 20 students a couple of years ago, and this year we are scaling that up to 40. So we're going from about 70 students of last summer to 110 this summer. Very, very difficult to raise money for this activity, but somehow we are managing, and I think going forward we would like to make the numbers even bigger. We are particularly concerned about gender. Okay, so this is about diversifying engineering and science. At the University of New Hampshire, in the engineering department, we have only 14.9% women. So the undergraduate student population is only about 14.9% women. If you remember the first slide I showed you, where the U.S. is producing only 83,000 engineers per year, and China is producing 1 million, you put 2 and 2 together and you realize that the only way we can actually increase those numbers is to target young women early on, the age of 12, 13, to entice them to identify with engineering as a career going forward. That's the only way you're going to really make any major gains, because you don't really want to go deeper into the pool of men, because I think most men that want to become engineers are already becoming engineers. But women have for some reason been discouraged from pursuing that career path, and we need to make that possible. Next slide, please. In addition to, I see that I didn't change the slide, but in addition to the summer camp that we have, actually you can move on to the next slide. Yeah, in addition to the summer camp, we are reaching out to the K-12 system. And I decided that rather than having a bunch of gray beards, going into middle schools and talking to these young ladies with whom they don't really have a major connection, that it's much easier for these kids to identify with an 18 or 19-year-old young woman who just a few short years ago was sitting exactly where they're sitting. So I have partnered with what I call the Society of Women Engineers. This is a national organization which has a branch here at UNH. And I'm sending these young women, it's a collaborative project because they want to do it as well. It's not me sending them. We hatched a plan that they would go into the middle schools and talk to these young women, 11, 12, 13-year-olds, about careers in engineering. So these 18, 19-year-olds are now engineering students themselves. And when you ask them how it is that they gravitated into engineering, almost everyone I've spoken to tells me that a close relative is an engineer. So they had role models, but most middle school girls don't have role models who are engineers. So I've challenged these young women who are in our program to go into the middle schools around here and talk to 11, 12-year-olds. So far, we have, I've been dean for 2 years, and so far we have visited 13 schools around the Durham area and the surrounding communities of Portsmouth, Dover, Exeter, and so on. This activity, although initially has focused on engineering, is one that I'm recommending for our Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. They need to do similar outreach activities, because that's the only way we're going to grow the numbers. And I think I better shut up and turn it back to, is that, who is it? Is it Pranoti or is it Carolyn?
I have to us both. Thank you so
Go
much.
ahead, Carolyn.
Okay. Thank you so much, Diane and Sam. So we're going to open this up for questions now. If you have questions, you can write it in the question box, or if it's kind of long, you can also raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can talk directly to our two presenters. So we have a couple questions that have come in. Roberta, how about I unmute you?
Hello.
Hi, Roberta.
Hi. So these questions were things that occurred to me for the first presentation. That was Diane, was it?
Yes.
Yes. You said that it was important to engage families of your students in order to attract students into earth sciences. And I was just wondering, how do you do that? You'd mentioned you have an Earth Science Week where you bring a lot of the community to campus and whatnot. But are there other ways that you engage their families?
Well, in one class I actually give extra credit points for the families going out to things like a museum, or if the water utility has a water day or something like that where there's a lot of family related activities, that they could attend this and get some extra credit points. Another activity that I do is a lot of the students live in houses that have rock walls around them. So I say, well, go out with your family and look at the rock and take some pictures and try to go through all of the tools you've learned to identify rocks and go through this process. And so they're out there and they'll send a picture with their son or daughter actually, making measurements and getting engaged in something that the whole family can feel they're participating.
So it sounds like most of your undergraduate students are living at home then, right?
That's very true. I would say that we're pretty much a commuter school, and I would say until most of the students are married, they live at home with their families.
And how do you get, how do you get them to take earth sciences in the first place so that you can give them these activities?
Well, I think at least in the state of Texas, there is a core curriculum, and they have to take 2 classes in natural science as part of this core. And initially a lot of them say, oh, well, I'll take something in geoscience or environmental science because that's easy. So you get them in the door because they think it's easy, and then the whole approach of getting them hooked is another story. But I think the classes are very popular too, at least in El Paso, because being in a desert with no trees in front of the mountains, you can see geology everywhere. So people think, oh, maybe I'll learn something about the mountains if I take this class.
Okay. The other question was mine too, and you talked about the numbers of students that had come into your program as a result of these different activities, and I was just wondering, I guess the community colleges wouldn't be that difficult to track because they're transferring in.
Right.
But how do you know how many students have come in because of Earth Science Week or what have you?
I think that is still a little hard to track, although we are asking the students, especially in the high school level, where you might have first heard about geology. But certainly a question that we probably should start asking now that we've had maybe 6 or 8 years of celebrating Earth Science Week. We should start seeing the 2nd and 3rd graders there. Maybe they're starting to come to UTEP, and we should be tracking that. So that's probably something we need to take a little bit more of a look at.
Sam, are you able to track your students as well that participate in your tech summers or your classroom visits with women or with girls?
So that's a good question. This is a relatively new program, and we are going to be. There are 2 issues here. One is that one of the weaknesses of our program is that when we bring these 12-year-old young girls into the program, they are here once, and then, they are 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, during which time all sorts of things happen in their lives, and chances are this is when they lose any interest in science or engineering. So one of the challenges that we are facing here that I'm going to try and work on along with my colleagues is having a group of activities that entice these young women, and by the way, we bring in boys as well, that entices them to keep coming back to the university for some higher level activity, so that every summer, there is a contact made with these people from the point of view of engineering and science, so that when they become 18, it's only natural that they would gravitate toward becoming scientists or engineers. So right now we plant a seed, but there is absolutely no guarantee that the interest is going to stay in place for a 5-year period before they become a college freshman. But we're going to be monitoring, that passage from 12 to 18 to see where it is that people start melting away.
Okay. We have another question for Diane. Diane, do your faculty ever go into the 2-year colleges to give guest lectures or work with the faculty that are there?
We do participate in that. In fact, right now we're becoming so successful. We're trying to work with the community college to have them offer mineralogy at their level, because I guess you're going to have another seminar on this, but our mineralogy, for instance, is getting huge and hard to deal with, and we only offer it once a year, and so it's kind of a barrier for some transfer students to time it right to be there. So we're working with them on that. Another advantage, because of our sort of closed loop, is that a number of our doctoral students teach as adjunct faculty in community college. So I might be seeing these students in class a couple times a week, and I know they're teaching at the community college, so we can really communicate about teaching methods. What are you covering? They actually come in and sit in on my lectures to get ideas for then going on later in the week and teaching the same subject material at the community college.
Okay, and a follow-up is, do you know of any other 2-year or 4-year schools in Texas that are having similar successes in transferring their students?
I think we're working now with a couple colleges in the Austin area. A lot of it is through my colleague Joshua Villalobos, and I know he's been working with community colleges to start that level, and making this connection, though, requires both ends, but we're certainly pushing it hard, because I think they're saying now that about 70% of the freshmen undergraduates in Texas are taking at least some of their coursework at community college.
Okay. Alan, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question. All right, Alan, go ahead. Oh, okay. He doesn't have a mic, so I'll ask it for him. So Alan's curious. A challenge with targeting K-12 groups for recruitment is that it might be a few years before those students show up in our program, and then they go into earth science but apply to other schools. This could make efforts look ineffective to administrators who want to measure success in recruitment. Any advice on how to handle this issue?
If you want me to chime in, I can.
Please do. Yeah.
I can answer that. I think that's an issue of educating administrators. You cannot a priori, tell a student that I'm going to help you through your teen years, only with the understanding that when you turn 18, you'll come to my college. They are at complete liberty to go someplace else. What really matters here is to be concerned about young people overall, no matter where they're going to choose to go to school. And ultimately, it's all about, upholding the standards of the country. If a person chooses to go to school in Massachusetts or Texas, I mean, it should be perfectly fine. What I would like to see is higher numbers of people going into science and engineering, and to precisely where they choose to go, it shouldn't really matter.
Diane, did you have any comment to that?
Well, it's not as much of a problem for us because, again, of our closed system and the fact that many students are very reluctant to leave home. So we tend to attract many students that way. Our problem is if they go on to graduate school, is trying to get them to consider leaving the community at least temporarily to expand their horizons. And we've been working a lot with undergraduates, trying to get them out for a summer internship anywhere but El Paso, so they begin to feel confident that they can leave, learn some new things, and then come back to El Paso and bring this to their community.
Excellent. Is there any other questions? Oh, okay. Roberta, I'm going to unmute you. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I had a follow-up question about that, Diane. Do you track where your graduates go? I was just curious to know.
Yes, we try to track them, and although a number of them stay in El Paso, I think especially once they have an internship experience, that they feel a little more confident that they can be somewhere else. And a lot of them, of course, with the oil industry, they can still stay in Texas. And I think once they realize, well, you know, Houston isn't that far away, and I'll be making enough money that I can get on an airplane on the weekend and come home. But it's just that initial stage of, I'm leaving home and I don't know what I'm going to do. And I think we have also established a pretty strong alumni network in the Houston area that helps these students when they come, and makes them feel at home and makes them feel that they have a community away from home.
Do you happen to have the statistics for your students? You know, what percentage go into industry, what percentage pursue graduate work, et cetera?
Well, most of our students, even that are in the industry, the master's degree is considered the professional degree, and so I would say that about 60-70% of our students do end up in the oil industry somewhere in Texas or surrounding states. And then we kind of have a scattering of people. Many of our students do complete a master's degree. I would say maybe only 10 or 15% would just finish a bachelor's degree. We really encourage them to continue on for that professional level.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions?
Actually, this is Sam. I have just one little comment.
Absolutely.
Thinking back to when I was the department chair, my dean sat me down and told me when I was new that he wasn't particularly happy with the very small number of undergraduate majors, and that, of course, included diversity and so on. And it occurred to me at the time, and this could be a problem in some universities, not just University of Michigan where I was, that when minority kids come into the university and go to academic advising, if they express an interest in science, invariably they are sent to biology or chemistry. Very rarely do they get sent to physics or geosciences or astronomy. So we discovered that it was pretty important to infiltrate the the academic advising group, and it was a pretty large contingent of people. So we went and gave presentations to them and made up a bunch of brochures for them to share with every student who showed an interest in the sciences but wasn't quite sure what they wanted to do. So through that very limited effort that took us only a few days, we actually managed to get a few minority students into the department. Now, it turns out also that the number of undergraduates doubled overall, but it's very difficult to quantify whether that intervention at the academic advising entry point, we call it a choke point, facilitated those numbers doubling in a period of just 2 or 3 years.